Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cisco Optics Podcast, where we talk about pluggable optics for networks. Manufacturing of optics has been historically cumbersome compared to electronics. With optics, you have to align components and glue them down or laser weld them. It was often done by hand because there wasn't enough volume to justify developing fancy robots. Compare this with electronics, where you put tons of devices on a single wafer and stamp them out on a highly automated fab. After years of effort, we finally have a way to stamp out optics too. It's called silicon photonics. The beauty is that we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. It leverages the existing CMOS infrastructure that was already there. This is episode 16, and we continue a conversation with Ron Horan. Ron joined Cisco through the Luxtera acquisition in 2019. Luxtera was spun out of Caltech by a group of professors and students and was known for its groundbreaking approach to silicon photonics. In this episode, we get into silicon photonics, what it is, and how it's revolutionizing optics. Ron attended the University of Texas at San Antonio for both his bachelor's and master's degrees. His master's thesis topic, entitled Synthetic Vision Landing Aid System, was patented as the first GPS-based aircraft landing aid. From 1994 to 1999, while at Compaq, he earned 15 patent awards. In 2001, he joined Broadcom Corporation, where he managed field applications engineering for the compute segment team, ran program management in the networking BU, and was a senior director of sales and strategic account manager covering the Hewlett-Packard worldwide account. In 2011, Ron moved to Luxtera, where he worked as vice president of sales before moving into the role as vice president of marketing. Luxtera was eventually acquired by Cisco in 2019, where Ron now runs product management for the Cisco Client Optics Group. Did you hear that? 15 patents, plus another as a student. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast. On Apple Podcast, you would follow us now. Depending on which platform you use, we may be part of the Cisco Podcast Network. Check out our blog at blogs.cisco.com and search on hashtag Cisco Optics Blog, all one word, no hyphen and no spaces. You'll find podcast notes and links there too. For our YouTube playlist, go to youtube.com and search on Cisco Optics. And for product information, go to cisco.com/go/optics. And now, join me as I talk with Ron Horan. So let's get into silicon photonics. I think you mentioned earlier that the terminology, the term silicon photonics, was started in 1986. What does it mean? What is it?
Well, just at an extremely high level, silicon photonics is basically is basically moving light. Basically having like a CMOS based IC, and you're moving light around in the IC and manipulating the light to basically to do functions like an optical transceiver. And so, you say, well, why, to really understand it, you have to understand more traditional optics. And you say, well, what was being done before silicon photonics? And, we used in the industry, they use the term bag of parts. And really what that meant was that more traditional optics, you'd have this warehouse, located somewhere in the world, and you'd have a bunch of people in this warehouse, and they would be handed this bag of parts, all these discrete components. And basically they would take that bag of parts and they would, under a microscope, they would hand assemble an optics module. And then once they were done with that, they would basically take it and plug it in. And if it worked, then, ship it. If it didn't work, then basically it goes into a bone pile, right? And so there's a lot of issues associated with that. Number one is that it's very labor intensive, and so you have to you need a.
And they didn't use robots, right? It's basically humans.
Yeah, it's basically human labor hand assembling optics, and just like everything else, as soon as you insert human beings trying to hand assemble something, the chance that there's going to be problems with that go up. And so, yields in the more traditional space could be as low as like 40% yields, going to maybe 80% yields over time as they kind of hone the process. And so that was one of the disadvantages. The other disadvantage is, in order to understand if you when in order to test the module, you had to completely finish the module, and then you would plug it in. And like I said, if it works, ship it. If it doesn't, it goes into a bone pile. The problem with that is you're taking a very big yield hit, because that thing that goes into the bone pile is an entire module. And so it's very inefficient cost-wise to put together, something completely and then have to throw it away. Right. And that was what they were seeing with that. The other thing is just reliability. I mean, optics for a long time had extremely low reliability, again, because what you're doing is you're taking a bunch of discrete components, you're shoving them together, and each of those components has its own tolerances, and so now you're also adding cost, because sometimes the tolerances don't make the module go out of specification. And so, I mean, there was just a whole sundry of different problems like that with more traditional optics, like a DML or an EML type based optic. So you say, well, how does silicon photonics fix that, right? So silicon photonics is basically, if you took a look at like a Luxtera, Cisco silicon photonic module, you open it up, you would see, you'd see something, there's not a lot there. If you open up like a DML optics module, it's like a can of sardines in there. I mean, it's just crammed full of stuff. There's fiber, there's just all kinds of stuff going all over the place.
So the structure is like what DML is direct modulated laser, right?
Yeah.
And so it's in its own can.
It's a TO can, and it's you need lenses, you need signaling. The real issue is if you look at a DML, you're taking a bunch of individual piece parts, lenses, and CDR chips, and all of these things.
And the optical components and the fiber, they all have to be aligned, right?
Right. You have to stuff all of this into a single module, whereas with silicon photonics, it's highly integrated. I mean, if you look at like a Luxtera solution, you've got a photonics die, you've got an electronics die sitting on top of it, and a light source sitting on top of it, that also on the P die as well. And that's it. I mean, that's the whole solution. You take the lid off of a silicon photonics module, and what you'll see there's not a lot in there, right? And the reason is...
And P die is the piece of silicon that's dedicated to the photonic functionality. Is that it?
The P die is the photonics die, and that basically, at least in our solutions, there's actually no active components. It's all the photonics components of how basically you have the photonics piece and you have the electronics piece. The electronics piece is there to basically is there to drive the signaling that effectively phase shifts the light so that you get ones and zeros, right? And so, I mean, at a very high level, the way photonics, at least our photonics work, is you have a light source, and the light's basically shining down into the chip. And then it goes into waveguides, and waveguides are the mechanism to move that light throughout the chip and get it where you want it to go.
And getting the light into the chip, that's something that's unique to Luxtera, isn't it?
Well, I honestly don't know if other people, we use grating couplers to get light into our chips. And so there's different kinds of grating couplers, polarization maintaining, and just all kinds of different grating couplers. And so,
can you explain what a grating coupler is in your case?
A grating coupler is basically it's an element that allows light to enter into the chip and go into a waveguide. it's basically on the top layer of the P die, and light gets focused down onto the grating coupler, and that there's a coupling loss associated with that, but the majority of the light goes into the waveguide. And so now what I've done is I'm actually bringing light into the chip, and that goes. Think of it as like a river, right? You've got light, and it's going to travel down these different rivers where you want them to go. And one of the things that we do with our silicon photonics is we use constant wave lasers. So if you think about like a DML, way a DML works is, think of it as a light switch with a light bulb. And to modulate the light, to create ones and zeros, you're turning that light switch on and off over and over, just back and forth, in order to what you're doing is you're creating ones and zeros by having light, having no light, having light, having no light. It's like turning a light bulb on and off, right? With silicon photonics, it's different. We actually have a constant wave laser. So for us, we're flipping the light switch and we just leave the lights on. It's on all the time. It doesn't modulate. It's just a constant. Think of it as a DC battery almost, where it's instead of current, it's actually electrons. It's actually generating photons, and so the photons get into the photonics die. They move through the die with waveguides, and you can do things to that. You can split it. You can take the light and split it, say 4 ways to create 4 channels. You can recombine light. But what we do is we take the light, so the light comes into the chip and then it goes into a modulator. And the modulators we use are Mach-Zehnder interferometers, MZIs. It's, it's common, people know what those are. So we use a Mach-Zehnder interferometer. And basically, what that is a series of diodes that allows you to use electronics to basically phase shift the light. So it's actually the electronics from the E die that are actually causing the modulation, by the electronics switching on and
And that
off.
modulation signal induces that phase shift in the interferometer, and because it's an interferometer, it converts that phase into an amplitude modulation.
Right. So what's happening is the light, which is constant wave light, is getting distorted by the electronic signal that are basically placed, across these diodes. And so you're able to instead of flipping a light switch on and on, now I've got electronics that are saying 1 0 1 0 1 0, and so you're causing a phase shift in the light to get your ones and zeros. And so once you've done that, once your signal is modulated, this is all on the transmit side. Then basically you take it to another grating coupler, and it exits the chip into in our case, it's a fiber array where the light goes into the fiber array and it goes goes out onto the fiber. On the receive, obviously this is very oversimplified. On the receiver side, the light comes, from the fiber, into a grating coupler. So you've got light coming in, which is the signal coming from the other transceiver on the other side. It's coming into the part via grating coupler. It hits a photodetector, goes through a TIA, LA, some signal processing, and then basically goes out. So you're basically doing an optical to electrical transition using a combination of photodetectors and TIAs.
And that photodetector is on chip on the P die?
For us, the photodetector is inside the P die. Yeah. So we're a fully integrated solution. For a lot of solutions, they have discrete photodetectors, discrete TIAs, discrete signal processing. All these steps are discrete. So you have a bunch of individual components. For us, it's just all in a single chip. So you were asking me the original question about why silicon photonics, right?
That was the second part of my conversation with Ron Horan. Next time, we'll continue with the benefits of silicon photonics. Subscribe to this podcast, and we'd really appreciate you helping to get the word out. Share this with friends and colleagues that come to mind when you think of network technology and optics. And leave a review on Apple Podcast. We're also on all the other major podcast platforms. You may see the Cisco Podcast Network come up when you search for Cisco Optics Podcast. That's where we live, and you can find other great podcasts there too. Also, check out the Cisco Optics blog at blogs.cisco.com and search on hashtag Cisco Optics blog, no spaces and no hyphens. We also have educational videos on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com and search on Cisco Optics. Thank you for listening. This is Pat Chow, Product Manager at Cisco Optics. The next episode is part 3 of my conversation with Ron Horan. Until next time.